So my wife was started me.
And like
And then
Eastern
discuss.
private island.
Okay, perfect.
All right, everybody, we are getting started /live.
No.
So we are starting, welcome everybody to our January 9th, 2025 Environment and Climate Committee. New attendance record, I think, so great work. We'll start with, well, actually, let's start with if there's anybody online letting us know that you can hear us.
Kelly, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So we'll start with a roll call. Andrew,
Present.
Covey, here. Kelly.
Here.
Laura.
Here.
Mark. Here. Neil, I'm here. Nick. Here. Ray. Here. Rory. Here. Scott. Here. And Smita.
Here.
And then ex officios, Jackie or Sasha. Not there. Okay. So just kind of an overview of what we're going to be doing today. We are, can we welcome new members now, or is that in your?
It was
Yeah.
in my staff update.
Okay, great. We'll be welcoming new members in the staff update. So we'll start with meeting minutes. And for new members, we just ask if there's questions or changes. We don't actually hold a vote, so you don't have to worry about not having read them if you didn't read them. December 12th meeting minutes were emailed out. Did anybody have any comments or corrections for the minutes? Okay, great. Not hearing any. Meeting minutes have been passed. We'll go to public comment period.
Is anyone in the audience, would anyone in the audience like to make a public comment? And then we do have some people online, so if you are online and you'd like to make a public comment, you can use the raise hand function on your Zoom screen, and then we can allow you to do so. I'm not seeing any online, so we can continue on to staff updates, which are pretty light this month, but the most exciting is that we're welcoming new members today. So welcome to Nick, Ray, and Scott. And I thought we could just do a quick round of introductions across the whole committee so that we can meet the new members and the new members can meet each of you. So just say your name and like if you want to share like one sentence about sort of something about yourself that's relevant to your committee work, that would be great too. So Kavi, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Kavi Choksi, he, him pronouns, and I have been on committee since the start. I served as vice chair 2 years ago, and I work for the Rethink Waste project of the Environmental Center. So I'm definitely focused a lot on waste materials.
Smitha Metha, she, her pronouns. I've been on the committee, I think, for 2 years now. And my background, I'm a water quality professional at the Department of Environmental Quality.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name's Neil Bonsgard. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the current chair of the committee and have been here since the start of the ECC. My day job is working in climate and transportation policy with background kind of focusing mostly on building decarbonization and transportation decarbonization.
Thanks. Ray Hartwell. I am new to the committee. My background is in conservation program design, specifically energy efficiency programs, and also do quite a bit with environmental water markets.
Hey, Nick Millar. I'm also new to the committee. So it's my first meeting. Background, currently work in EV charging. And then I've also worked historically in building energy efficiency and also solar and battery. So a couple different areas that the committee cares about.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rory Isbell. I've also been on the committee since its inception, which is like 4 years ago now, I think.
Almost like 4.5.
4.5.
Yeah.
As we're into the officially second terms.
Yeah.
Right. Let's see, my day job, I'm a staff attorney with Central Oregon Land Watch, land use and environmental advocacy organization here in town.
Welcome. My name's Laura Tabor. I have been on the committee, I think, a year and a half now, so I'm glad I'm not one of the newbies anymore. Or at least not as much of one. My background, I started out with an engineering degree working in energy efficiency, also in energy efficiency programs. Dr. Ray. And then have shifted more recently into climate and energy policy, both working in state government for a bit and now in the nonprofit sector.
Great. I'm Andrew Calise. I think I've now completed 2 years on the committee. I've always worked kind of at the intersection of buildings and energy use and energy efficiency. I've kind of had my hand in the energy and buildings section of our climate action report and climate action strategy, and also did some work for the electrification policy as well. So welcome and happy to be here.
Hi, Mark Buckley, I guess, second term start, so from the start, like, several of the folks here. I'm an economist, with Echo Northwest, lead our environment group, so mostly some dimension of benefit cost analysis, funding kinds of questions, policy, mechanism design around resource management, water, land, energy, climate.
I'm Scott Nordquist. I work with Bend Redmond Habitat for Humanity, so specifically in grants and funding. So spend a lot of time looking at funding sources in the affordable housing world. And I'm frequently involved with AHAC, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. So excited to join over here.
Great. Well, thanks, everyone. And you all know me, but Megan, do you want to also introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, guys. My name is Megan. I've been with the city for 3 months now, and I'm supporting Cassie with the climate and environment program.
Ashley.
I'm Ashley Bonchi. I'm the deputy city recorder, and I provide meeting support, recruitment support. So the new members, I've emailed you a few times, and I help process the stipend part of events.
And then actually, so Mary Winters, for existing committee members too, Mary Winters, our city attorney, did retire in December. So she was our committee attorney liaison. Michael Selford is going to be stepping into her role for our committee, not her actual role, that's Ian Lighthizer, but Michael will be our committee attorney. You don't have anything to say for yourself?
No.
And then we also have Counselor Norris sitting here as well. She's our council liaison. Okay. Okay, well, anyway, so again, welcome. We're super excited for some new energy in the group. The only other update I have is a reminder that our council advisory body summit is on Tuesday. As I wrote in the email, it's a new opportunity, new this year, for advisory bodies to provide input into council goals. You'll recall that in December, we talked about, we had a form that we had to submit on behalf of the committee that we talked about in December. So we went ahead and submitted that form earlier this week. Neil will attend the summit and present your input into that, but all committee members are invited and encouraged to attend. So as many of you are able and willing to join that, I think it would be great to have some representation. And I don't know a lot about the format of it. Are you more familiar with that?
Yeah. We're going to start with the mayor. We'll give a little presentation, which is a welcome. Then we're going to have about 2 minutes for each advisory body to present their goals and input. We'll have dinner, and then you'll be assigned different tables. So you won't necessarily be with all ECC members, but you'll be with at least one or a staff. And you'll be seated with either a counselor or city manager or assistant city managers. And we've had some discussion questions that we'll talk about. And if you are, I'm going to try to send those out on Monday, so you can look at them in advance. And then each table is going to report out on what you discussed.
And the idea is, in the past, when we've done council goals, it's been sort of like committees come up and there's just the 2 minutes that we are going to start with in this meeting, where you share the goals to the council, and then that's sort of the extent of the input. And the idea was that it was meant to give you that opportunity, but then create an opportunity for conversation and to hear, to just talk more in depth about those goals, to share with other committee members from other advisory boards, and also hear the types of things that they're wrestling with. And so it's just meant to facilitate a little bit more personal exchange between committee members and counselors. So we're pretty excited about it, but it is new this year. So it'll be a little bit of an experiment, and you have to RSVP.
It's a public meeting, so technically we don't. I would appreciate it because we're ordering dinner.
Okay. Okay, then we can go ahead and move on.
All right, we're going to do chair, vice chair elections. And bear with me, it's kind of a process that I'm trying to make sure that I'm following the proper script for. So we had 3 nominations.
Can I
Yeah.
ask for clarity? Are you officially not a candidate?
Yes.
Okay.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say that the big
The
news
big
here
news.
is that Neil decided not to put his name in for nomination since we had other interests. And as those of you who have been on the committee know, Neil's been doing it for like since the very beginning. So it's gonna be a big evolution for us and a new era. And we thank Neil so much for all the years that you've contributed. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah,
Still
I guess
there.
that is the important thing that I should mention. So yeah, I am still very much excited and motivated to continue on with the ECC. But hearing that there was other excitement to join, I think it's really healthy for groups to have different people, even just like running meetings. I think there's a lot, especially since this committee is still relatively new in terms of city advisory boards, to just bring in different voices, and we have really capable and impressive people on this committee. So thanks everybody for stepping up. That was the important pre-piece I was supposed to say before. So we had these amazing people that put themselves forward for vice chair or chair. So Mark put himself forward for either the chair or vice chair, Rory and Laura for vice chair. And so the way that we'll do the election process is we'll start with the chair role. And then we'll go to the vice chair role because it makes things smoother. Okay, great. So let's see. Oh yeah, we received 3 nominations. So for the chair role, we had 1 person nominate themselves, Mark Buckley. Are there any additional new nominations for the role of chair?
And I guess we can check in with Mark. We hadn't.
And
had
Mark,
time to
are you
talk
still
about
okay?
it. Because I know in your blurb, you did say that you had a preference for the vice chair role. But seeing that there's no other chair nominations currently, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share how you're feeling about this.
Yeah, and
nomination.
just to be transparent, Cassie and I had conversations, Neil and I had conversations. I knew there was a need for folks to put themselves forward, and having been on the committee, I was happy to do it. I've been on several nonprofit boards, and I feel like I generally understand how things operate. I will say that Neil's expertise on much of the policy and his day job being such a close fit has been, I think, very helpful and critical for the committee. And I've worried about my capacity to perform at the same level, especially in terms of time commitment. But I suggest I'm happy to serve the role of chair. Also interested if others are having thoughts about it still, but recognize that I'd probably be looking for a little bit more support, at least topically and from a policy perspective, and probably check in with Neil pretty frequently. So, but from an administrative role, I'm happy to, and also happy to talk more about myself. But I would see this not necessarily like trying to drive policy as much as just play the role.
And as a reminder, like the default tends to be that the chair is like the person who does all the council presentations and everything, but that role can be delegated. So if there's scheduling conflicts or if it's subject matter expertise, it's totally that's totally fair to do that. So the person who's the chair doesn't have to be, and it's true, I think Neil's been contributed a lots and lots of his time as a chair role. The expectation doesn't have to be that it's that same extent for every person who's chair, because it really is a team effort for all those things. But yeah, with Neil's professional role and expertise, there's been some natural alignment there. So just for anyone considering it now or in the future, you don't have to be as great as Neil.
Have you?
I just had a question, actually,
Yeah.
with what Mark just shared, especially from a capacity standpoint and the slight preference for the vice chair role, I was just curious if any of the vice chair, folks running for vice chair are also interested in chair, and if it would make sense to then do vice chair first and then do chair based on that, if there was
Yeah.
interest from either of the.
That's an open question. Opening nominations for the chair is how I'm dealing with that.
Yeah.
So if that's open for everybody, including Rory and Laura, if you also wanted to.
I will say my preference for the vice chair role comes mostly from a time commitment standpoint as well. And yeah, but I do think that with either vice chair candidate, you would have some policy support.
I'm in the same boat. It's a time capacity issue for me. Which is why I would prefer to keep my self-nomination limited to the vice chair role.
Yeah, and I think that the point is shared that there's opportunity, like a lot of the responsibilities aren't kind of enshrined in the chair must do this. And so when there's opportunities, and we've already done that as a committee in the past of it, I didn't present to council when Mark or Rory wrote like kind of letters to council about oil trains and like a couple of things, right? So when there's different expertise or availability, we can really share those responsibilities as a committee. And I think what I've realized through lots of different levels of being on the committee is that folks have times where they really can step up or have the expertise to step up, and periods of even like in a 2-year term where it's like, I'm just slammed. And so I'm not going to be able to step up for this chunk of time. So
Another thing too that has changed is with Megan coming on board too, I'm actually anticipating that I'll need to lean on the chair less than I've had to for the last several years. So even just some of like the meeting prep stuff, we've been doing 2 meetings in between each ECC meeting. I actually think with Megan here now, to help me work through some of the stuff that I work through with the chair and vice chair, we can cut that down to just 1 meeting in between. So yeah, we're definitely just in an evolving space across a number of factors. So it's fine if it looks different in the future than how it has.
any other questions? Okay. Is there anything else you want to say, Mark, before we vote?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I feel good about it. You all can impeach me if I speak.
The good news is that elections are always really awkward. So we're maintaining that into the 3rd election. So I guess officially reopening to see if there's any other nominations for the role of chair. Okay, not hearing any. Can we have a second to Mark's self-nomination for the role of chair?
I'll second.
Great. Any discussion? All right, all in favor to nominate Mark as the chair of the ECC, say aye or raise your Zoom hand.
Aye.
Oh, great, that looks like everybody. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And then we'll do the vice chair, and then you technically take over.
Am I supposed to take over right now?
I think technically you might actually be supposed to do this next one since we did it backwards, but
Okay, I don't know enough the rest of the
uh,
but I
All
guess.
you need to do is just announce the agenda item.
yeah.
Well, I guess as a first point, maybe I will recognize that there are 2 self-nominations for the vice chair position, and I want to open it up to see if anyone else would like to nominate or self-nominate or revise their nominations.
And Michael, is it okay if I can I keep doing the election and then, okay, great.
Okay.
That way you don't have to add it. Yeah,
I think we can ignore the technicality.
great. Yeah, I think we're good.
Not
Yeah,
realistic and validate.
yeah. Okay. If that's okay, Chair Buckley.
Yes, member Neil.
Okay, so for the role of vice chair, we had 3 nominations, Mark, Rory, and Laura.
Oh,
And if there's anybody that nominated themselves that doesn't want to run anymore,
I guess that would be
great. And then is there anybody else that either wants to add themselves to the nominations for vice chair or change your self-nomination? Great. Any other notes? I think you both commented on the chair role, but and submitted a statement, but any other comments?
I guess I can note quickly that, yeah, I think basically what I wrote in my statement, I'll just reiterate briefly that really enjoyed being on this committee for the last 4 years. I've learned a lot from you all. And I think the work of this committee is only increasing in importance, and I'm excited to, for one, just be here another 4 years, and obviously, if, I'm willing to step into that vice chair role. The other small thing to note is in my day job, I recently tweaked our strategic plan to sort of officially recognize climate action as part of our scope, the work we do, which means I have potentially freed up a little more time for myself to aid the work of the ECC in my working hours, I suppose. So that's sort of why one reason why I'm willing to step into the vice chair role.
Laura?
Well, I'll echo what Rory mentioned about enjoying being on the committee and learning a lot from you all. It's been really exciting being able to do something local where most of my work is state level, and connecting some of those dots here where I live. And I think I've been kind of taking the first year and a half or so, absorbing the work of the committee, getting to know the ins and outs of the work, and have started to, feel a little bit of that pull towards, oh, it would be fun to put a little bit more direction and energy into this, with the time that I do have available outside my day job. I do still have that limitation, and just thinking about, what I would bring to the role. I am pretty tuned into state policy issues on climate and energy. And I hope that could be helpful, as well as my background having been in a government role in the past, and just sort of understanding the mechanisms that we need to work through, and sharing that with the committee.
Awesome. I'm really excited that both of you were willing to consider this, all 3 of you. Okay, not hearing any other nominations. This one's kind of a weird process. I'm going to explain the process for the election. You get to vote for one person, but the way that the process that was laid out by Mary is that we will have essentially an election to nominate one person. And if that's the person you're voting for, you'll vote in the affirmative for that person. And then we'll have the election for the other person. Does that make sense? So it's like, if you wanted to vote for candidate 1, just only raise your hand for candidate 1, and then we'll nominate candidate 2 and then vote for candidate 2. So you get to raise your hand either first or second.
So not for both.
So not for both. Yeah, that's very clear. So the way that this works is with multiple candidates, is in the order that we received nominations. Rory, we're gonna start with Rory and then go to Lara. Does anybody have questions? This is kind of weird. Okay, I know, it's weird, but yeah, this is how it
Never
works.
had a competitive.
We've never had a competitive. Rory has been nominated for the position of vice chair. Can I have a second motion to nominate Rory as vice chair?
I'll second.
Great. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of Rory as your vote for vice chair? And online,
Kelly.
okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm gonna move on to a second. Do I have to close this or say that it didn't? Okay, great. So can I have a second nomination, a second motion to nominate Laura as the new vice chair?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Great. All in favor of Laura as the new vice chair?
Keep your hand.
Okay, and then Laura received the majority of the votes. May have a motion and a second to accept the results of the vote.
I'll move to accept.
Great. A second.
I'll second.
Great. Any discussion?
Just briefly, I think either one of you do a tremendous job. So
Yeah.
thank you both for throwing your hats in the ring and Lori, be happy to have you.
Yeah.
Same, hearing that Laura's got some state policy experience and probably much more than I do, I was being selfish.
I'll add, I'm thrilled that Laura will also be stepping into that role, so, no offense taken.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat rare to have multiple nominees for a volunteer committee and really healthy. And so I know it's uncomfortable, but it's really good that we did it. So all in favor of the motion on the floor to accept the nomination. Great. All right, motion carries with a full voice vote.
What would have happened if he didn't accept?
I don't know. It's not in the script. So Mark, you get to announce the rest of the agenda items, or yeah. Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So our next agenda item is to discuss the outreach and education plan.
Yep, and just to give a little bit of context to this agenda item, you all remember that pretty much like a year ago now, the ECC was talking really actively about the work that you were recommending we do around education and outreach, and we had our communications team come in, do a creative brief process. That was last February already, so really it's been a year. And we had mapped out in the early spring for you our plan, sort of a technical plan where we're going to revamp the website, start doing some more social media, all of it to sort of begin meeting some of our CCAP strategies focused on outreach and education. We even worked with some of the working groups to start developing some of that website content. We just kind of took a pause on actually moving forward that website update until we had Megan on board because we just didn't have a lot of capacity. So that owning sort of all of our outreach and education efforts is one of Megan's primary responsibilities. So that's what she's been on board for less than 3 months already, but she has really dived in and is has a plan for how we're going to continue that work that we started. So this agenda item is mainly for her to give you an update on where we're at with that and some of the things that we have planned. And then if we have time to get your feedback on it too, but no like specific decisions, but just some sort of general feedback would be great. And then we can also talk about how you guys as a committee would like to stay involved in that effort. So I'll turn it over to Megan. We don't have slides for this part, but we did have one of the memos was her outreach and engagement plan. So she's gonna start by talking through that.
Yeah, for sure. So the engagement plan is like kind of a long document right now, but I summarized it in the memo. So that's kind of what we'll be going through today. So yeah, super excited to share the progress on that. Like Cassie said, for the past month or two, I've just been working on putting together strategies, kind of reviewing similar cities and what they're doing, and then also taking feedback that you guys have all discussed previously from the creative brief and what you guys are talking, or what you guys are saying is responsive to community needs as it comes to engagement and outreach. So yeah, I'm thinking we can go through the memo, and then I have like 4 engagement discussion questions just to kind of ensure that this is the right path that we want to take for this new year. And just as a general, the engagement strategy is specific to 2025, just knowing that like engagement is kind of ever evolving and will need to be responsive to community needs as they kind of show up. So I didn't want to make like a 5-year plan, just knowing that it'll probably change. So this is kind of the pilot for engagement and outreach, and just yeah, acknowledging that it'll change as time goes by. But yeah, super excited to walk through it with you guys today. Okay, cool. So the goals and objectives, and again, this comes from kind of notes from past ECC meetings and then conversations that Cassie and I have had. So the goals and objectives of our CCAP engagement are to gather community perspectives and feedback that represent diverse communities of Bend, to inform CCAP implementation and guide decision-making. Also to create a framework for community action that clearly outlines how Bend residents and businesses can achieve CCAP goals and take ownership of action implementation. And then to educate, empower, and energize the Bend community to cultivate a shared understanding of climate change and inspire action. And then to strengthen community relationships with the city to facilitate and coordinate CCAP implementation and other priorities/activities. Yeah. We can talk about thoughts there later, but just kind of to set the stage for the goals and objectives of our CCAP engagement. And then messaging and tone. I've been working with the communications department here at the city to kind of build out templates for the engagement we want to do, and something that they really wanted to see was just ideas for messaging and tone. And so something that came from your creative brief was that we wanted the tone to be supportive, empowering, positive, inviting, for the community. And then the key message, again, taken from that creative brief, was to empowering change and preserving tomorrow together for a greener world. So that's a cool little tagline that we can be using in the future. There's some levels of engagement that are kind of tacked onto the different strategies that are proposed in this plan. And this comes from, it's called the spectrum of engagement. And so it goes from inform all the way up to collaborate. So informing is just kind of the basic level of education that we'd be doing. So providing clear and accessible information to Bend residents about climate initiatives. Kind of the second level, so taking a step up from that, is seeking feedback on specific aspects of Bend's climate initiatives. And then a step up from that is involving the community. So really engaging the community and discussing kind of the CCAP activities that we'll be taking. And then the highest form of engagement is the collaborate. So partnering with community members and organizations to co-create solutions. I've outlined, I think, 5 or 6 engagement and communication strategies for this year. And this is what I'm hoping to get kind of your feedback on in our discussion. The first thing that we're hoping to do soon, is revamp the city website for sustainability. So making sure that it's a centralized hub just for updates, resources, and tools. This is where the data dashboards will be held. So people can go onto the website and understand like what the city's currently doing. And then also have the CCAP progress report. You'll see in the timeline, this is like the first thing that we're wanting to do. So hoping to get this revamped by March 15th. So we're working with the comms team right now to draft the content, and just the general city website's going to be having a makeover. So it'll look really nice when that's all done. The second thing we want to do is develop an energy navigator program. So I know the ECC's talked about this, but this is kind of housed under the engagement and outreach program, I guess we could say. So really being a one-stop shop for community members and business owners to go to our energy navigator program and understand how to electrify their house or their business, and really providing that one-on-one assistance for folks. So it's easy to understand how to get there. We're hoping to have that done by end of June or July. And so the next steps on that are to present options for different navigator programs to the council in February. And then once we get direction on that, start making some progress into actually building out that program. We're wanting to bolster our presence at in-person events. So kind of taking advantage of existing opportunities such as Earth Day, Pride, City Fest. So really just kind of getting the name out there, telling folks what we're doing, using that as an opportunity to distribute one-pagers, potentially some swag, again, just kind of educating residents on what we're doing. And then we can also use that as opportunities for two-way dialogue. So getting feedback from community members on what they want to see, making them engaging opportunities for the youth, maybe partnering with some high schools. Yeah, so making our presence at in-person events more relevant. And then fourthly, or is that third? Yeah, fourthly, building out our social media and a sustainability specific newsletter. So we're working with the comms team, kind of like I mentioned, to develop, I don't want to call it a campaign, but like a sustainability specific social media schedule. And then also a sustainability specific newsletter for the city. We have the Bend Current, but we're wanting to really kind of dive into having a sustainability focused newsletter that residents can subscribe to on the website and get like monthly newsletters. I'll kind of go into the content of that later. But that is another one of our strategies. And then our last one here is one pagers. So I know one thing that I've heard from you folks and from Cassie is a desire to have one pagers on topics that are relevant and can kind of be handed out at those in-person events or can be handed out to community members. So that will, there's not necessarily like a timeline for when those will be developed, but I think that will be an ongoing basis depending on like what the needs are of the community and what we're actually working on. So like with electrification policies, like we can develop a one pager on that once we have more clarity on how to move forward with that. Or like the Energy Navigator program, we can develop a one pager on that. So just putting that out there. Going down to the timeline, I kind of mentioned the website and Energy Navigator being the two most pressing things happening this year. Again, in-person events will kind of come as the year goes on, but like I mentioned, we're gonna try to have presence at Earth Day, Bend Pride, and then City Fest, and then yeah, other events as they come up. And then social media newsletters, those will be ongoing. We're hoping to do social media posts bi-monthly and then newsletters every month. Okay, so if we go down to table 2, that's the social media and newsletter content by month. So this is, I put together like a proposition of newsletter topics and content, and then also social media posts that we could do starting in March through the end of the year. Shall I go through all of them?
I don't know that we need to go through all of them. Maybe just sort of describe the topics and schedule and stuff.
Yeah, so the idea is to kind of start in March with like a welcome newsletter. So here's the sustainability newsletter, here's kind of the vision, and then progress on the CCAP. So people just have a general foundation of what that is. And then the idea is with the newsletter to kind of like coincide that with social media posts. So they like speak to each other. So they're correlated, I guess is the word. And then April, we do something on Earth Day, or an Earth Month special, just taking advantage of that opportunity. And then May, water conservation, June, renewable energy. Yeah, I'm not really going to go through all these, but these are just some general ideas, definitely open to feedback on like if this is responsive to what you guys have heard the community wants to learn about. Yeah, I kind of just put this together. But
and the content areas may evolve, like obviously when there's like really timely things, we can sort of slot that in. But the idea was, especially for working with our comms team, kind of mapping out like the type of content that we'll be putting out and getting some sort of structure to that.
And then, okay, cool. So then going down to equity considerations for engagement. I've been meeting with our equity team just to make sure we're, obviously centering equity and engagement in communications. And so we're meeting on, I think next week to kind of talk more about this, but just some general considerations that I wrote down were making sure that written materials are ADA accessible, that translations are provided as needed, and that we're avoiding jargon and using writing at an 8th grade reading level so it's accessible to community members. In terms of monitoring and evaluation, we're going to regularly evaluate our engagement efforts and track metrics like website traffic, attendance at events, social media reach, program participation. optional demographic information and then feedback collected through surveys. So we're constantly like adapting our engagement to be responsive to what the community is wanting and needing. Some immediate next steps are to, I say finalize engagement plan, but really just like formalize the engagement plan, just acknowledging again that it is a living document and will be updated frequently. So that will be this month. And then finalizing the Energy Navigator program options for council by February, like I mentioned, and then revamping the website by March 15th, and then launching the first newsletter, sustainability newsletter by March. Okay, that was a lot.
And as you guys can imagine, this is very exciting for me because this type of thing just was nowhere near possible without Megan here. As those of you who have been on the committee, it's been a big topic of conversation for us over the last year. So we're making it happen now, which is really exciting.
Cool. Okay, so I think we can go into discussion. The first one is, do you have any overall feedback or suggestions for the communications and engagement strategy? Any significant changes you would like to see? Again, just trying to make sure that this is reflecting what you guys have spoken about in the past and being responsive to, yeah, your guys' priorities.
And connected, the next question was like, if you guys can remember to when we were talking about this last year, if you feel like it still sort of reflects the types of goals that you guys were hoping for back then, if you can remember.
Just to clarify, the question was specifically about the strategies and if that's reflecting. kind of
Yeah,
the discussion
and just general feedback is any kind of feedback's open for.
A clarifying question. I'm really excited that the Energy Navigator program is in here and looking at the timeline and the notes about proposed, this is about sort of scoping an Energy Navigator program as opposed to launching.
Yeah,
something.
well, the hope, I mean, the Energy Navigator of all these is sort of like a little bit separate because we're still trying to scope it now. And depending on what that scope looks like may determine the timeline. But our sort of stretch goal is we're really in that, we're in a scoping phase for that right now, pretty aggressively, because it came up through our electrification work that the council, that was one of the things council was very supportive of and expressed some desire to get things going. So I'm actually hoping if everything comes together that we could launch by the middle of the year this year, but there's a lot of things that have to come together to make that happen. But I think as Megan mentioned, what we're sort of thinking is we're talking to other cities right now, trying to get a good understanding of different models. We think we'll probably have maybe 2 different models to propose, and we'll get your feedback on it and also the council's feedback that will have probably different levels of resource needs associated with them. And then the main conversation is going to be for the council, which of those are they interested in? And then it's going to be tied to the question about resource, where are the resources going to come from for the program? So those are discussions that we're hoping will play out over the next couple of months, but we're still sort of figuring out how it connects to, they're doing council goals over the next couple of months. And so just the timing of everything and the sequencing, we're still figuring out, but the goal, if everything like were to continue moving, would be to actually try to launch something by the middle of this year.
Cool.
We'll see.
Yeah, that's what I was most excited about as well. It's really exciting to see this whole package, but also seeing how that fits in with the website and the newsletter in terms of content that people can actually use to inform their decisions, investments, behaviors. It does make me think about the importance of keeping this all updated, that it's getting it built and then committing. I love that the newsletters have a monthly schedule already, which sort of helps with that pre-commitment strategy to produce something that feels like keeping the website updated and the navigator, but I see how that's going to be part of the navigator design process.
I think it'd be important to check in with this committee before you do each monthly update, because I think there's some topics that come up in the community that we might want to highlight.
Yeah.
And that's I was thinking that the hard to recycle option.
Yeah. Yeah, we could try to, we always run out of time in meetings, but we could try to have a standing item of just like, this is what we're planning for the next month or 2, and then get feedback on that.
So I think this is all great, and I do think it reflects what we talked about last year and the need for more outreach, education, communication for really all four of the CCAP strategies. I guess my question is like, this is, it looks really ambitious, like doing the Energy Navigator monthly newsletters. That's a lot of content creation, research with various city staff, I'm sure, and other stakeholders. Like, are we biting off more than we can do here? Do we have the capacity to put out all of this great outreach and education?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question, and I think the first couple of months will be a good test of that to see if that is possible. I think because the majority of my role right now will be implementing this, I can do that. Like I feel like I have capacity for that. Again, who's to say, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. Like, though, I don't know if
She can do it.
I
I think
Oh,
over
no.
the last year, I think in particular, we definitely heard a lot from this committee and even from our discussions with council that like we haven't been doing any of the education stuff and really we need to do that. And it's sort of a foundational piece even to be able to do other types of programmatic stuff too. So for that reason, I see it as a big priority for this year, which is why it's going to be a big portion of Megan's role. And then it'll be, we'll have to sort of check in throughout the year and figure out what feels sustainable to do ongoing and sort of maybe figuring out like which aspects of it we're getting the most value out of versus what we're not. The Energy Navigator, I anticipate outsourcing for that and not actually running that in-house. So that's an important clarification because the Navigator program alone is sort of a full-time job, or could be. So again, depending on the resource requirements for those, that'll have to shift. So, but that's baked into the assumption here is that we wouldn't be doing that portion ourselves other than overseeing it, obviously. So for Megan, but the content creation part is significant for sure.
And I guess that I was thinking something similar to Smita for similar reasons that I wrote, that Rory's raising, that I raised, how these would speak to each other, that I think collectively the committee has a fair amount of topically specific expertise that hopefully can help do that. And maybe that's something for the committee to have in mind during the year. You know, we tend to have these small subcommittees for new members that focus and do a deep dive and bring recommendations back. And it might even have some roles in production of some of this.
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, we can talk about how to like leverage the ECC
Yeah, for
for
sure.
content. Yeah.
Yeah. Which we did before we started the CCAP update, we had started generating some content ideas with your working group. So that's all sort of the stuff that I gave Megan to work with to begin with. So we are starting from that and then we'll continue. We'll figure out a way to continue checking back in to do that.
Had a couple of points. This is really exciting to see. Thank you for putting this together. And just a little context, you may have already received this, but also for general, there's a lot of CCAP actions that do have to do with education and outreach, and especially on the waste and materials side, there's quite a few. And so one of the things waste and materials working group had done for last year was we selected 2 priority things, and just education and outreach in general was one of the top priority for waste and materials for 2024. So it's really good to see us getting there now and having a timeline to get there for 2025. And especially, I think it looks good. It looks ambitious, which I like, but also being reasonable with your capacity. So I'm being flexible with that. A couple of pieces I just want to mention was this is something I'm especially interested in. I just have a lot of experience on the education and outreach side, and also with my day job working with the Rethink Waste project. A lot of our work is education and outreach related in the community. So I would love to continue to see if there are ways to engage, or if committee members are interested, if there's a way to engage, especially on the content side, in terms of making sure the best content is being sent out there, especially for newsletter, but also for the website and the sustainability hub. So I'm curious if there are going to be some more opportunities to continue to engage with the sustainability hub piece specifically. And we had some meetings as a waste materials group to like do some mock-up and kind of come up with like what that could look like. And I'd love to see if that can still be incorporated as it goes. I saw that it says that the communications team is going to lead that, but I would want to make sure the content is using best practices for that part of it.
Yeah, we haven't actually talked about that step explicitly in our work with comms, but I think what we can do, we're starting the content creation portion, and it is a back and forth with comms where Megan's gonna write up a draft, send it to comms, and there are some limitations like based on the website structure and just some ways we're doing a big website revamping project to make sure we have like consistency across our web pages. So there's going to be some limit. It's not going to be just exactly how we want it because there's some of those things to think about. But what we can do is once we have sort of where we think where we're getting close to final content, but not final, we can send that back out. And anyone who's interested can, provide some feedback for that before we like finalize it. I think that will work. Would that meet it for you?
And I don't want to take too much time, so I think we
Yeah.
can have like more of a offline discussion too,
Yeah.
if it's helpful. I think my question was more, if I recall correctly, the waste materials team had met and we had kind of proposed a little bit of a sustainability hub with some, especially on the waste reduction side and the materials side, how to structure it in a way that would be, to summarize it quickly, reduce, reuse, recycle is one of the waste hierarchies, and often a lot of messaging gets focused on just recycling, and it kind of ends up just putting more focus on something that has less impact than reduce and reuse. And so I think how it's structured and how it's laid out can really be impactful for community members who are accessing it. And so I do think it would be helpful to do more than just feedback after it's already created. It would be helpful to have initial and make sure that what we had discussed as a working group is incorporated for the initial planning too. If that's
And we
possible.
did. So like I did what the notes that I have from what we talked about were given to Megan, and maybe she can join one of the next monthly waste and materials group. That might be the best way to handle it for that group specifically, since you guys had more robust sort of ideas from your group. Might be the most efficient way to do that. And she can sort of share what she's got so far, and then you can reiterate some of those
That sounds
ideas.
great.
Would that work?
That sounds great, yeah.
Okay.
And then the other quick notes I'll go through is the key message that was included here, I don't know if I recall that very clearly. It does, I will be honest, it seems a little pretty generic to me. I wonder if we can make it a little bit more specific. Just like empowering change, preserving tomorrow, together for a greener world, doesn't really resonate for me. I don't know if it would resonate for the community, so I wonder if we can make it a little bit more specific to Bend. I don't know if that's been through a process with community and with committee input already or not.
Yeah, I mean, that came directly from the creative brief from the ECC, so we can, I don't know, maybe like talk about amending that. I don't know, like.
Yeah, I think
Because I don't
at
want to like
this
own that
point-
myself. I feel like that's a committee.
It did. It came from the creative
Yeah.
brief that comms put together after our workshop. I think at this point, it might be the most efficient use of time to just, I'm not sure, like to just work on the website content and then work with that. Unless you were planning on like using that as like a really top level thing. I think it was more
Not really.
inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine then.
Yeah.
Couple more questions. Who will receive the newsletter? Is this going out to everyone subscribed to the city newsletter, or is this being built from scratch like a list?
It would be a list of people that sign up for it. And we do have a couple of lists that we'd probably start populate it with at the beginning, because from our survey that we just did, there was a question about if people would like to hear more information and updates about the CCAP. So I was going to include that list. And then we actually have a list of people that have signed up on our website. There's that functionality now, like if you want to be made aware of any updates. So people sign up for that, but we've never shared any updates. So I can use that same list too.
Okay.
And then it'll just be on our website, like you can sign up.
Okay, and the accompanying question is also just how will it be promoted? And the reason I ask is I feel like there's going to be a lot of really good content in newsletter, and I want to make sure people are aware of it, because often I feel like newsletters have a lot of good content, but it's not promoted very well, and people don't end up getting, like many people don't see it, and people are usually surprised to know there's a newsletter out there. So I just want to make sure that's not forgotten. And it's not just focused on the content, but also on the marketing and promotion side of it. And then the last question, on the equity side, what was noted, I saw there were some good things noted for equity concerns, which was like the written materials will be ADA accessible, translations will be provided as needed, and avoiding jargon. I'm also curious, I feel like engaging with the underrepresented communities will also be like specifically, I feel like is, I think also just as important from an equity standpoint of like, having those discussions with those groups in terms of how can we best get this material out to communities that are not currently receiving it. So I just want to mention that too. I didn't see it
Totally, yeah, thank
specifically
you.
listed there.
Yep.
And maybe a little bit more clarity on what translations will be provided as needed means is that, I guess we're not committing to translating every newsletter in Spanish, but is there going to be a summary of it, or is there going to be some level of translation provided by default?
We haven't gotten that far yet.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, and I know that's
But
a
yeah,
lot.
thank you.
You're welcome. I'll stop there.
And that's something I'm thinking through and like I've had conversations with the comms team about. It's kind of just like where. Yeah.
Okay,
I don't know
that's
what our
fair.
standard is like across the city, so I'll have to figure that out. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Like we don't translate every, we do not commit citywide to translating every single piece of information. So I'm not very familiar with what the what the criteria are.
That's fair. I just wanted to kind of
And if we'll
flag it
that,
as
yeah,
like what
thank
does
you.
that mean? I didn't mean to overload with too many questions.
No, that's super helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Step back.
Also like time wise, how do we?
Yeah, I was gonna.
I know I would like to move on to the next agenda item. But if you guys anyone that wants to talk more about the communications work, you can get in touch.
Yeah, and definitely like email me if you have any more thoughts. Because super curious to hear what you guys think.
Can I just say one more thing before we move on? I was thinking back to our brainstorm sessions. I don't remember if it was during the communications workshop or some of our CCAP conversations. But I feel like we'd had a lot of this energy around the idea of campaigns and sort of more sustained communications on a particular issue for a longer period of time. And so, I mean, the newsletter content looks amazing. And I think if our goal is sort of baseline awareness and education building, I think it's a great foundation.
Yeah.
And maybe come back to the campaign idea in the future. But if we wanted, I guess you could sort of rearrange the topics a little bit. So you had, 3 related ones in a row might build more towards that.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And part of the initial iteration of the engagement plan was doing a sustainability campaign similar to like Keep Tahoe Blue, which I know you guys have talked about before. But I think the idea with campaigns is that they like build off of previous learnings from like engagement from the years prior. And so since we don't really have that, the idea is to like use this year to kind of just build out foundational education and outreach. And then next year work on a sustainability campaign that we can really like take lessons learned from this year.
And
And
we'll have
build
the
out
channel
further.
set up.
Yeah, and like have
And
more of
maybe
a-
we'll be ready by the end of this year too. So I think
Yeah.
if there's something, like timely.
Perfect. So with that, can we move on to the next agenda item, which is CCAP discussion, current status, and next steps?
Yeah, thank you. So what I wanted to do for this agenda item was sort of reorient ourselves with where we're at in the CCAP update, because I think we're getting close to the point of being able to finalize that CCAP update, and we need to deliver it to the city council and recommend it. And so anyway, that's my goal is to just sort of reorient us to where we are and then talk about next steps and hear from you guys what else you think you need to get to a point of where we're ready to recommend this body for to the council. So just as a reminder, and this is also good for the new committee members of the process we've been to date. So we've been updating our community climate action plan, and for new members, the decision was made last year when we were sort of scoping this update to keep, because we wanted to continue making progress on implementing the plan. It really was sort of what we called like a light update. And so we did most of the work within our standing committee meetings and held a couple of additional working groups. So in the spring, early summer, we sort of took the existing CCAP, looked at our progress and just refined the existing actions. We took off the ones that we said, okay, that one's complete. We can sort of take that one off of our to-do list. We refined a bunch of the language to just bring it into whatever the current, just modernize it with the current context or the current status of the project. That was sort of step one. And then in the summer, we broke up into different working groups, and that was when we generated the list of new actions. So that's sort of like the heart of, this is the body of the CCAP update. In September, because we had done that in separate working groups, we pulled, when the full committee came back together in September, we reviewed that list of new actions. And so that is sort of our working CCAP update proposed action list. In September, we just needed to get final enough with that we were comfortable advancing those actions to be, to do the greenhouse gas modeling analysis and also our community survey. So if you all recall in September, we did not like vote and say, this is our final list, because it was just getting introduced to us, but it was sort of close enough. We spent October and November doing the GHG modeling and the community survey. We do still have some loose ends we're tying up on the greenhouse gas modeling. In December, those months we were focused on the electrification topic. In December, last month, we shared the results of the greenhouse gas modeling and the community survey. So we're at a point now where we sort of like have most of the information we're going to have. We have the list of proposed actions that the ECC said, generally speaking, this is what we want to propose as the update. And we need to get to a point where we're adopting that list of actions. So our next steps are that it's basically adopt that list of actions. I also want to have a discussion about if there are other kinds of recommendations sort of related to implementation that you would like to include as part of the CCAP update package. So when we proposed the initial CCAP, there's the action list, and then there were sort of these implementation recommendations, one of which was establishing this committee. So you can, it's the right time to include sort of key things that you think need to happen to make the plan be successful. Those can be sort of packaged together with the CCAP. So I think we need to have a discussion about if there are any of those things you all want to include. And then, of course, we need to go to council and actually deliver that recommendation. So my questions for you now, so this is just meant to be an open discussion to just sort of gauge where you all are at. And if you all feel ready to, I included in the memo that proposed list of actions. They also some of them were refined a little bit since you saw them in September. Nothing really super substantively that you wouldn't have seen already. Check in if you guys feel ready to get to voting on approving that list. Maybe that's the first question, but then my second question is about those implementation recommendations, and the two things that I would recommend we include are the same two things I brought up as part of the council goals, which are that we recommend as part of the package a funding source for implementing CCAP programs, and then also the creation of this community partner grant program so that we can meaningfully partner with community organizations to implement some of these programs. So those are not new topics for you today, and they're also not new topics for the council, but I think sort of reiterating them with the CCAP update makes sense to me, because they're sort of things that we need in order to make this update actually be implementable. So that's sort of a big overview, but we have 20 minutes left. So I'm just curious for people's thoughts on really any of those things.
And realistically, updating these would kind of mess up the schedule to some extent.
Yeah, you mean like going back to that proposed list? Yeah, so I had kind of a goal of bringing this to council in the spring. So I said March or April. If we wanted to like really rework that list, it would change the timeline. It would also, we've also finished the modeling. So it would, depending on how much it changes things, if we also want to have modeling, we would just have to think about the implications of that.
So it is a big decision to reopen the list of.
Yeah, I think that there's room for tweaks still, but if it's like a whole new area, like, oh, we just didn't even talk about doing this thing at all, and it doesn't sort of fit within the strategies. Recall that the modeling happens at the strategy level, so depending on how specific it is, sometimes you can sort of slot it in, but sometimes it's harder if you want the modeling to follow it. And then even just the discussion.
Oh, no,
process.
no, I was just, I mean, I'm sure everyone here, especially with the new committee members, honestly, I think there's a lot of new expertise in the room now. And I like the idea of continuing to make these as actionable and practical and consistent with current state of policy incentives, which is obviously changing, and we did this before the election and things
Yeah,
like that,
that's
but
true.
things will keep changing. So I don't have anything specific. I will, you know, as an example, the EV, encouraging EV adoption is something where I know there are some forces potentially against that in terms of transportation system funding and the like. And I know, for example, places like Madras are looking at increasing their fees on EV chargers for non-residents and such. And so there's this tension between reduced gas tax revenue and fairness, let's say, on that. So, and I'm sure there are other factors like that, but I wouldn't want us to slow down our update process for anything that's not critical. And so maybe it's also more a question from the new committee members too.
And a lot of like the details, like, you know, the plan, I guess, for new members, like it's high level. So the strategies and actions are meant to be high level and flexible so that it sort of gives the direction, like, yes, we want to put in EV chargers, but it gives the flexibility to figure out how we do that still. So it's not like just because we're finalizing the plan now, like it's our next steps are set in stone. They're not at all. So there's a lot of room still to continue working and bringing in the new expertise. So it's I think finalizing the list is more about like, are these the types of things, like, are these the areas we want to be working in?
How long is this supposed to stay? Like, how durable is this until it gets revisited again?
We're committed to like a 3 to 5 year update process.
I think one thing that just stood out to me is it's really long. There's like 23 things. And like, to get back to what I think comments were earlier is like, are we gonna have time as a city? Like, will we have the resources and the people, the focus factor needed with a list this long, especially looking at the modeling and seeing, you know, there's 100x differences in impact on some of these. So do we want to tighten it up a little bit?
And the work plan is not 3 years. The plan gets updated every 3 years, but the CCAP strategies are modeled over the length of like our commitments. So there might be some of the discrepancy coming.
But I think a layer that I actually do think would be helpful for the council would be, even if we didn't want to, if you didn't want to take things off the list, to have a prioritization of for the next 2 years. And we touched on it a little bit in the council goal input. So we sort of flagged some of the things that are priorities, but they're actually things that we're sort of working on already. But I think that would not be a bad addition if you guys felt like you were willing to go through a prioritization process, which has not always been our strong suit. But going to the council and saying, okay, this is the update, you know, but they're not all meant to be fully implemented in the next 3 to 5 years, but that giving sort of a 2 year, like, you know, just some focus, I think they would appreciate a lot.
It's a really important, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, it's okay. Go for it.
Well, I was gonna comment on react to Nick, because like something again, for those of us who are around from the beginning, when we first started the committee, we spent most of our time just trying to decide how to prioritize to know which things to act upon, at least at the category level, strategy level. But yeah, I think that's been a consistent issue that we should do better with.
I was gonna, I guess, bring up council and goal setting as well, and it kind of sounds like, if I recall from previous meetings, we're trying to time this to work in tandem with council goal setting.
Well, we tried,
Right.
sort of. Like, I think in a perfect world, we would have like been able to wrap it up a few months earlier, gone through like the 2 year prioritization before, and then had that be our input to council goals. We weren't quite able to hit that. So we have the input to council goals, you know, that we've already discussed. So the question between like, what's the difference between the input to council goals, which will be our 2 year work plan, you know, that's sort of the 2 year work plan versus a different set of prioritization you guys might deliver. I haven't worked out how those things work together in my mind.
Yeah, so I guess I'm trying to work that out in my mind too.
Yeah.
And it would. I'm specifically thinking about the implementation recommendations as well. It would be great if we had some feedback from council on
Yeah.
their 2-year goals, to
Mhm.
help inform.
Yeah.
You know, what we're saying here. And I know that like one informs the other, right?
Yeah.
When we go into council with our recommendations for goal setting on Tuesday and other times, like hopefully they hear us and
Yeah.
you know, their 2-year goals reflect some of that, but
Yeah, which we
yeah.
will, even by the next meeting, definitely by March, we would have, they're doing their council goal workshop on February 3rd and 4th, so before our next meeting. So we will have some direction on overall goals, soon.
Yeah.
Which will help.
I wanted to kind of second what Nick said, and this has been a concern of mine, I think previously I've shared as well. But just going through all of them, there's 23 strategies, and then the actions increased from 42 to 74. And I know during the modeling meeting, I asked the question, what are these models based on? And it's based on the actions being implemented by 2030. So that's a 5-year time frame to if you're trying to keep those emissions models accurate. And I know from experience, and we've had discussions about what's realistic for us to accomplish in terms of how many actions per year, and it's usually around 2 to 5. So I just feel like we're not, I'm not seeing how those two would connect properly, and I would rather see if there's a way to really reduce the number of actions that we're committing to, if that's by way of prioritization, that can make sense. So that's one thing I just want to share. And I think the second is, I wonder, I know the actions are not the same as SMART goals, but I really do wonder if we could come up with like some SMART goals that just seem much more specific and precise with the timeline that's attached to it, as part of either our 2-year plan or annual plan or whatever it is. Because I just think for me, at least, like having 74 things to keep track of is not like, it doesn't work for my brain. And I just feel like it makes it less effective as committee to say, we're gonna set to do this as our plan. So that's a little bit bigger discussion, but it's more about minimizing than like making it more.
Are you all interested in doing a prioritization exercise at the next meeting? And if so, willing to commit to, with the goal of eliminating some actions? And I ask because, as you guys know, like we have tried to do that in the past and we do really struggle to. So I'm hesitant to use a lot of time doing with that goal to not be committed to narrowing our focus.
Because we have. Ray, did you have something?
Yeah, I'll just offer some newcomer perspective on this. I'm looking at the list of the 4 areas and the different goals. And I've got all kinds of thoughts and feedback and reactions, certainly at the tactical level. And I don't know if it rises up to a new specific action we'd want to capture. But a lot of it is around questions of prioritization. And in particular, the due diligence you need to do before you can even prioritize. So there's a lot of this stuff I'm like, based on my day job, that's a slam dunk. Or I think that's really so expensive or complex or risky as to be non-viable. I'd want to take a look. So I'm thinking maybe like, is there a stage gating process or additional interim information collection that we can use to inform some of that? Just so we have a more substantive prioritization before deciding, hey, we're all in on, number 5 or we're going to take a pass on it. I'm not sure we have the information to totally prioritize, but we could probably do some kind of process that would get us there.
And the way, because the problem is that to gather more information on 74 actions, it's just not even, even if we gather them, if we try to communicate them out. And I guess one thing I should say is that it's also good to remember that some of the actions are happening without any additional work from this group. So when we say it's 2 to 5 actions in a year, actually, when we've done our progress report, we've moved forward much more than that rate of action. The way we've handled that in the past is that we've broken up into working groups because then people sort of share their subject matter expertise on each of those things, and we've done a prioritization. So we've done that before. We could definitely do it again. It takes a couple of months to get through that. And so I think the way that we've done it before is that we've, we could recommend this to council and say, this is the CCAP update, and then spend time going through the prioritization, after that with that body, so that we can still like get it endorsed from council.
Sure, and I have no
We
idea
can
whether
figure
my
out,
perspective is new news or not, so
Yeah.
I'll just follow the group's lead, of course.
Rory.
I hear the feedback about what 72 actions being a little too unwieldy.
Mhm.
I have never viewed this plan as like a list of actions that like must be worked on simultaneously or like must be conquered in X timeline. It's a universe, right? It's a community climate action plan. So this is the list to the best of or knowledge and the community who's been involved in the formation of this plan has come up with on how to reduce pollution, greenhouse gas pollution in the city. And it's, I guess I don't see it, it doesn't stress me out. Like I'm kind of hearing having this big universe of actions to work on because of things like Cassie said, like some of these don't require any work from this committee or the city in some ways. There's certainly a role for outreach and education, or transit is a great example because the city doesn't operate transit, but we know we want to increase transit ridership to reduce transportation greenhouse gas emissions. So I'm fine with it increasing. And if we think about like changes that have happened in the last 5 years, and the recent electrification work is the best example, right? That's something that we recognize wasn't captured as well as we wanted it to be in this plan. So we added. So I think it's great. It's kind of a living, evolving document that can reflect an expanding sort of universe of our understanding of what we can do as a community to reduce our climate impact. But I also agree that prioritization just has to happen, right? Like, whether it's from council looking at our plan and saying, these are what we think is most important and want you to work on, go. And then maybe we don't need to spend 2 or 3 months ourselves doing it. Or if that's not the case, like, yeah, we'll have to do something to figure out what we're doing next.
And I think practically speaking, I have the same feeling about like the amount of things in the plan as you do. Like it's more meant to just scope the body of work of things that can be done. I think in a perfect world, and it's not even just in a perfect world, truly realistically, the work plans should be aligned with the council goals. That's how, if it's not, then everything's an uphill battle in terms of staff support for things. So the way I see it is we've kind of done that. I hate to say that because we did that last month and I don't want people to feel like, oh no, now we can't do other things. I think if we were to look back at that, it really did reflect a lot of things that are currently in motion and things that you all have been talking about. So I sort of see it as like in the future, linking up the prioritization and work plan with the council goal process. And I sort of think we've done that for this one, but it was awkward because we were also like in the middle of this, the plan itself wasn't finalized. In the next council goal round, we won't be in that same place where we're still figuring things out. So then we can look at what did we accomplish these last 2 years? Let's look at the plan. Let's figure out for these next few years, what we want to provide input in for the council goals. And that's truly going to be the most effective way of prioritizing, because when it's part of council goals, it doesn't only prioritize my time and Megan's time, but all the other support staff that we need. And so many of the actions in here, if we say, oh, this is a priority for us now, even if I'm like, okay, I can support that, the rest of our organization can't. So council goals is really where that happens.
I agree. And I think remembering last month that we voted on a 7 goal priority of like kind of our work plan that we're putting forward in council goals. Like, I think it's a never ending. This is just working with scarce resources, right? We like have scarce resources, we have a list and we're making progress on it. And I think there's always continued refinement that'll happen. But I think we have enough, and we voted on those priorities at the last meeting, that we have enough, I think, to support a general direction that we were supportive of then. And also we're on the cycle of having new committee members and the opportunity that as we engage in those, that's when we like get into the weeds and can talk through the details and like refine the strategy within the outreach and education program that we talked about, and all of the opportunities to prioritize the content that's going forward in there. And the, like, there's the community partners, like there's so many different areas that we're gonna be doing prioritization in anyways, that I think like looking at the universe of 72 actions, going through a prioritization process to me right now seems like it might be a step back that might not move us anymore with a step forward than the list that we already voted on last month. That's my feeling.
Can I add two last quick thoughts? I appreciate how Rory put it. I think the only thing I would disagree with is that the unwieldiness, I think, from my perspective, makes it less effective for the community to refer to it as a plan or like have clarity on exactly what the city is doing, and also for the committee itself. Having it be something that's more nimble and short and succinct, I think can be helpful in just giving us a little bit more focus. And so I just wanted to share that piece of it. And then the second piece is just, I'm still curious. I can understand if not all of those things we are setting a timeline of achieving in 5 years, but then I do wonder about that disconnect between the modeling and the plan. And if that's just something we accept, or if you're trying to somehow solve that or acknowledge that this is like probably not going to be something we're going to reach in 5 years. So I just wanted to at least mention that piece, but I'm not attached to going through a prioritization exercise. It's more just I wonder if many of these actions can be merged into one, especially the education and outreach actions, because that's where I think there's so many of them, but so many of them would go through the same process of getting the content out. And so that's where I wonder if there's a way to simplify it, still retaining the same intent.
Okay, since we're at time, what I would propose we do is use the next meeting to go again through the action list. And it'll be a good opportunity for new committee members to be familiar with that. We can sort of like, again, reorient ourselves to what's in there and what we meant by it. Maybe by the end of that meeting, we're like, this looks good, we want to vote on approving it. Or maybe in the process of going through it, we sort of work through whether it's you guys want to if you want to consolidate some things or just sort of rework the structure, we can talk about those things, Laura.
I'm just thinking it could be helpful, time permitting, for the work groups to try to meet between now and then and have a first pass at look again at the data, look again at the list. Is there anything you propose cutting or merging?
Okay.
And then we could at least start next month's conversation with some recommendations.
Are we having a February meeting? Or is that?
We are, yeah,
Okay.
I was wrong about my conflict, so,
Okay.
yeah.
And the council retreat, goal setting retreat is before our next meeting?
Yes, just, yeah, it's February 3rd and 4th, so I'm trying to figure out if that's the same. I think it will be like a week plus a few days before our meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there openness to meeting in the working groups? And I could reach out to the new members about getting involved in those. We'll try. It's sort of hard sometimes to schedule, but we can at least do that to get a little bit ahead of it. And then I think it's a good time for us to just go, because we haven't really like gone back into the list and remember. And then we can also crosswalk. We should have the final results by then, the GHG results. And so we can sort of like look at that all together. But I might stop short of doing an actual prioritization exercise, but more sort of like looking at it all and just discussing where we think it's at.
That's good.
And I think that would probably be like the primary, topic next month. So.
And the new members have an assignment to a working group.
I think it's gonna.
I'll email them. Yeah, we'll try to,
Okay, great.
we'll talk about.
And on the topic of working groups, I just want to make a quick plug that the Waste and Materials group lost 2 members. So we'd love to have any members interested join.
Yes. Okay, I think that is good for today then. Adjourn.
The meeting then.
Thanks for the
Thank
team.
you. Thanks, Mark.
Cool.
Thanks, Laura. I'll also get in touch with you about scheduling our program.
Hopefully it'll be a good opportunity to get back on like.
Yeah,